Typing furiously, he finished a plan as it grew dark. As he was hungry again, he decided he would grab another cookie on his way out. Standing up, he walked slowly to the park to meet Wendy. She was by the fountain and didn't see him until he was drawing close. There was a small dog on the ground at her feet. She turned to him and started to laugh.
That's terrible! Like, really, really bad.
Ah, why? What's wrong with it?
I think we better sit down and talk about this. So today in this video, we are going to share 6 writing tips for writing better prose. Hi, I'm Talia Newland, Managing Editor at AIA Publishing.
And I'm Rose Newland, the book designer and publishing assistant at AIA Publishing.
When I first started writing, I didn't know what made good writing. I looked everywhere to find answers. There are a lot of books about the general aspects of writing, things like character development and the big picture structure, all of this kind of thing. But it was really hard to find anything about how to actually write good prose. And I'd write a passage and then I'd look at something that a professional writer had written and go, that sounds better, but I didn't know why. So I went on a journey to search for answers as to what makes not just good writing, but good prose. And I asked everybody that I worked with, my editing tutors and mentors, and I looked everywhere on the internet and picked up little bits from books all over the place until I had my answers.
And then she wrote them into this book.
I did.
So there's a difference between good writing and good prose? I thought writing and prose was the 2 words for the same thing.
It's actually how you write each sentence, each paragraph. So it's actually like the words that you use and how you put them together, how you structure them in sentences. So when you read a really beautiful piece of prose, it just sounds lovely to the ear. When people talk about writing, it can include all the big picture stuff. When you talk about prose, you're talking about the sentence structure, right, and the rhythm and the flow and that kind of thing. So prose is really the department of a line editor, which is what I do.
So what makes good prose?
So what makes good? Let me read you a couple of quotes from people that I think really encapsulated the essence. So this quote comes from a publisher in Sydney, a mainstream publisher in Sydney. She says, "Beautiful writing is when every word is the right word in its right place and there for a reason. There is nothing extraneous. The words flow so smoothly that the reader is transported beyond the words. They even forget they are reading."
I love that when I forget I'm reading.
Yeah.
This is by an award-winning author. Writers we in time call great tend to follow all the rules of good writing. Spare, interesting, easy to read, easy to understand to the point that we forget we are reading.
Yeah.
They both said the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
So today we thought we would play a little game with words and sentences. Mum, you're going to read out 2 sentences to me, and I'm going to try and pick which one
has a writing fault.
Has a fault.
Has a
writing fault. So I obviously am usually on the designing side of things and I work in a visual medium otherwise, so we'll be stretching my brain muscles back to extension English in high school, but let's do it.
Okay. Running through the trees, she shouted for help. Sentence 1. She ran through the trees shouting for help.
Well, I feel like I'm cheating on this one because I know that you hate sentences starting with INGs because of a previous video that we did. So I'm going to say the second one, she ran.
The second one is better. Is better, yes.
So the first one starts with running.
Yeah.
Which is a bad way to start a sentence.
The first one starts with the present participle to make that clearer for people who don't know what a present participle is.
That's me.
It's a verb that has ing on the end. So I call them ing-ending participles. Words like running are participles. So this starting a sentence with an ing-ending participle or a present participle is a really bad habit. Now you can say, oh, it's just a stylistic thing. And that's fine. But the problem is when it's overused, and unfortunately, it's being overused a lot. So the thing with the ing ending participle is it's fine if you use it about once every 10,000 words. Now, my editing mentor, she said to me that the problem is if you use it more often than that, it gives the prose a sort of a samey feel. It starts to all sound the same. And some of the books that I've read, which I can't finish reading, I just put them down, you'll see this on every third page.
It's a deal breaker for you.
It's a deal breaker.
Absolutely.
No, because it sounds terrible. Both parts of the sentence need to be happening at the same time for it to work. So we have, you were reading, standing up, he walked slowly to the park. Well, he can't walk and stand up at the same time. He stands up first and then he walks. So that doesn't work. It works if you're sort of saying, thinking about George, she did the dishes. In that you can do those two things.
So they have to be happening at the same time.
Yeah, you can do those things at the same time. But it's still bad form. And typing furiously, he finished. It doesn't work either, because if he's finished, he's no longer typing furiously.
Yeah. It's probably like a subconscious thing where it's like you wouldn't necessarily notice, but if it happened a lot, then it would sort of be like...
That's the thing, When it's used well, it's great, But honestly, once in every 10,000 words it's a really good guide. And you can kind of go, oh, it's a rule, I don't need to use the rules. But honestly, anyone who actually knows anything about good prose will notice. And that means the people that are looking at your book in competitions, that kind of thing, or wanting to put your work in a magazine, if you're actually applying to a proper literary magazine.
Or wanting to publish your book.
Yeah. Well, when authors come to us and want to publish it, I just tell them they have to get rid of them. So you won't see that in our books.
Yeah.
I found this information in this book, and I'm going to give it a shout out, because Self-Editing for Fiction Writers by Rennie Brown and Dave King is a really good book. It's got a lot of great information in there for writers. These guys say that this construction is the mark of a hack writer.
Ooh.
He was after her like a shot. He raced after her like a shot.
Yeah, I mean, he raced after her like a shot sounds better, because it's unclear when you say he was after her like a shot. How was he after her? I mean, yeah.
Well, raced is more descriptive. Yes.
Implies running rather than
What about this
driving
one?
or...
She was at the lookout staring over the railing. Or she stood at the lookout staring over the railing.
Yeah, it's like she stood at the lookout is more of an activity. It's like you get a clearer picture of what she's doing.
Yeah, it's a more active verb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was and were make it less immediate.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Good. So was and were are to be verbs. The other ones are be, am, are, is, being, was, were, and been. So these are passive verbs. So when we talk about writing without using these verbs too much, we're talking about making someone's prose active. We're talking about showing rather than telling. I mean, they're boring verbs. They don't really tell you very much, right? Which is what you picked up there.
They're in specific verbs.
Exactly, yeah. So if you can leave them out and replace them with a verb that's more interesting, more active, then do so. What about this one? They were coughing up blood, or they coughed up blood.
Yeah, it's like in some sense you don't even need it. De-wazzing. I remember a long time ago when you were going through and de-wazzing your books.
That's right.
Very long time ago.
Yeah. So when you put a to be verb with a present participle, right? And ing, remember ing?
Yep.
Right? Coughing, running, skipping. So if you say was skipping, you can replace it with skipped.
Yep.
Instead of was running, you replace it with ran. Instead of were coughing, they coughed.
Yep. Obviously you need them sometimes though. You can't just get rid of every was and were in a book.
No, that's right. But my de-wazzing was me going through and looking at every was and every were and asking myself, could I replace it with a more active verb? Yeah? And if it was followed by a present participle, running, skipping, ing.
And that's an easy one. You just get rid of it and put
Yeah,
ed.
yeah. Well, sometimes you do need the was in there. You know, like if I walk into a room and
Or
discover,
she was running out of time.
because
She
it's
ran
happening
out
now.
of time doesn't work.
Yeah,
because
'cause it's happening now.
changes the meaning of the
Yeah,
sentence.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So
why it's
you
a
do
present-
need your was's and your were's at sometimes.
So that's the to be verbs.
To be verbs or not to be verbs.
Yeah. As he'd heard about the coming rain, John turned off the sprinkler. Or, John heard about the coming rain and turned off the sprinkler.
Well, John was much more decisive in the second sentence.
Yes. The thing about the as is it's less immediate because it's a periodic sentence, which means the reader has to wait until the end of the sentence to find out what's happening. It's like the second part of the action comes first, or the less important action comes first, which is why you said the second sentence is stronger. Now, again, if you use it occasionally, it's okay. But if you overuse it, prose is simply weakened by it. It's just one of those things that if you can avoid using it, you can just avoid using it. And
As much as possible.
yeah, and writers do get into the habit of relying on as, not even just at the beginning of the sentence, but in the middle of a sentence too. And so you'll find it repeated a lot. So again, it's just something worth looking at and seeing if you can construct your sentence a different way.
Tip number 4.
There was something about her that made him stay quiet. Or something about her made him stay quiet.
I'm going to say the second one was better. Those were unnecessary words. There was
Yeah, what does
something about her. It's not necessary because the sentence reads just fine with starting with the word something.
There was. Does it add anything to the sentence? No, nothing. And that's why they're called empty openers. Like there actually is a term for this.
Empty openers.
We've got there was, it was, that was,
Yeah, it's back to wasing.
were, again, wasing and working. Yeah.
Wasing and wearing.
And it's really easy to get rid of them. I mean, again, sometimes it's useful. Tip number 5, sentence number 1. Whenever he saw her walk down the street, he would run out to play with her. Sentence number 2. Whenever he saw her walk down the street, he ran out to play with her.
The would was really not necessary.
The would.
He
Yeah.
would run.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
ran out.
Yeah. So avoid.
More immediate without it.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. So avoid woulds and coulds because coulds are the same.
He was, de would, de could.
Yeah. It's less immediate, it's more passive prose. The would puts in this gap between the reader and the action. So best avoided. And it delays the action,
Yeah.
right? Tip number 6. Mary began to skip down the block. Or Mary skipped down the block.
Wow, it's really a lot of just about getting rid of extra words, isn't it? Because now it's doesn't need to be there.
Exactly.
Began to skip.
It's like she began to laugh. Well, she's either laughing or she's not. The beginning to is, again, it delays the action. So it's like the reader has to read this extra word before they get to the actual action. So the writing's less immediate. And of course, what you want in your writing is you want it to be active and immediate because that is the most engaging prose. This isn't
Just use ed words, basically.
well,
Because a lot of
yeah.
them can be replaced with verbs that end in ed, right?
Exactly, you got it exactly right. ED verbs are much stronger than ing ending verbs. And so wherever you can use ed instead of ing ending verbs, do so. You'll just get much stronger and more active, more showing rather than telling. So those are the 6 tips.
6 tips?
That's just the 6.
You didn't tell me there was only 6.
Oh, no,
That's a bad number. We need 7. All right, bonus tip. Tip number 7. Because we can't only have 6 tips, you'll be left wanting more. What's number 7?
Number 7, sentence 1. Walnut frowned and shook his head, or Walnut looked thoughtful. Remember, we're talking about making your prose more active and making it showing rather than telling.
Right. So, frowned and shook his head is more active.
Yeah, and it's definitely more showing because it tells the reader what the character
How
did.
he looked thoughtful.
Yes.
Instead of just describing that he looked thoughtful.
Yeah, and if you're writing from the point of view of the character who's looking at Walnut, then you're showing the reader exactly what that character sees. What they see is Walnut frowning and shaking his head.
Yeah.
If they say he looked thoughtful, that character is already interpreting what has happened for the reader.
Yeah.
So it's better that the reader is left to interpret the meaning for themselves. That draws them further into the actual action, brings them into the scene, so it's like they're then seeing.
More like they're watching a movie.
Yeah.
All right, so going back to this first thing that I was reading, which, by the way, this paragraph was written by Talia to illustrate these points. It's not an actual manuscript that we're reviewing or anything like that. So typing furiously, he finished a plan as it grew dark. As he was hungry again, he decided he would grab another cookie on his way out. Standing up, he walked slowly to the park to meet Wendy. She was by the fountain and didn't see him until he was drawing close. There was a small dog on the ground at her feet. She turned to him and started to laugh.
Right, so now you see it.
Started to, wases all over the place, INGs, woods.
So I rewrote it. His fingers flew over the keyboard, and by dark he had a plan worked out. His stomach rumbled. Time to meet Wendy. He stood, grabbed the last cookie and strolled to the park. She stood by the fountain and didn't see him until he drew close. A small dog sat on the ground at her feet. She turned to him and laughed. So,
I feel like I'm there in the park with Wendy.
Good. Yeah, so that is what a line editor does.
There you go.
Improves your prose.
Improve your prose. Well, I feel like I've learned a lot in this video. I also feel like I did surprisingly well, considering I know nothing about these things, but a lot of it was sort of instinctive in just terms of hearing what sounded right or sounded more decisive or more immediate, which I guess is all back to that show, don't tell thing.
Yes.
So,
and which is why if authors read out their own writing, they can sometimes hear what they don't pick up just by reading it. You can hear it, because a good prose has a nice rhythm and flow. Yeah. So to get all the other tips,
buy the book.
These are the faults that I saw all the time, over and over and over
in
again.
Independently published books.
Yeah.
Or self-published books.
Well, both. Yeah. I feel very passionate about getting rid of these issues in writing, because the more that people accept them as being adequate writing, the more the beauty of the language just is completely destroyed. I mean, what if authors read that sort of thing? They read that writing in other people's books. So because they've read someone else's book that's been published that's got that kind of writing, and they think it's okay, so they write like that as well. Before you know it, everybody's writing like that. And
you can't find a good book to read anyway.
No, and those of us who know the difference between good prose and not so good prose are throwing all the books away. Or, horror, going back to mainstream publishers. Oh no! But it is one of the reasons too why I do reviews on really good indie books. You won't find any of the books that I review won't have any of these issues in, because I think it's important to really call out the good ones.
Yeah.
All right.
And there are good ones out there for sure.
There are fabulous ones out there. I would really love it if you could share this widely, because it really is information that all authors need to know.
And readers.
Well, readers, if readers know this, then they'll know what books to give 1-star reviews to.
Brutal 1-star review.
Let's hope it doesn't happen, because everybody's going to read this book and write fabulous prose.
Exactly. All right, that's it from us. Bye.